It's great to be here. I very much appreciate the invitation. Any chance to see Chris Liu is one that I like taking advantage of. Chris, as you can tell, is a very thoughtful guy. The Department of Labor is really fortunate to have him as the president. Was so fortunate to have him as the secretary to the cabinet in his first term, and we've worked together a lot over the years. And we both have a passion for the issue that is at the center of why all of you are here. And I drove down today, took the train down today just for this. I'm heading right back. But I did so because I am such a fan of Harold Levy and of the foundation. And I think this whole idea about developing that pipeline, and especially focusing on these high-performing, low-income students, has got to be a major focus for all of us as a country. And I want to talk about that. A lot of what I'm going to have to say in a few minutes is very similar to what Chris said, because we are very much on the same page, including some of the stuff he talked about. I'm also going to be talking about Switzerland. What I didn't know is that the president's first job was an ice cream scooper, which was also my first job. So, yeah. But I want to talk a little bit about first sort of why this is so important. This has always been important. It's especially important now. And then I want to talk a little bit chronologically, because I actually want to start by talking about some of the younger students. We have a huge focus on high school, including many of the things that Chris just talked about. But let me just give you a sense of why we live in an age where this is particularly important. There are these two fundamental major forces at work on our economy that have a huge impact on the people we serve, and they have a huge impact on, for those of you who are educators and the people you teach, and for those of you who are employers here. I do want to say also, one of the things I really appreciate about this conference is the fact that you're bringing together educators and businesses. And to the businesses who are here today, I have one really important point to make. Please don't sit here thinking that we're asking you to wear your charitable hat. This is not like a do-good, feel-good kind of thing. And even, if your responsibility, if you're the DC representative, and if you're a government relations person, a very important job, but there's a bigger issue at stake here, which is your employer, no matter where you work, you're going to have a big issue of hiring skilled workers for a long time to come. And this partnership that you've got, that you're sort of building with these schools and with other schools in your communities, is incredibly important. So I also very much appreciate the fact that you're bringing the businesses and the educators together. But the two forces at work, not very complicated, but really important to think about. The first is that employers have more choices than they've ever had before about where to hire. So jobs that when I was graduating from high school, that by default would have gone to the United States or Canada or Western Europe, maybe Australia or Japan, that was pretty much it. That's where the good jobs went. And the fact is today, employers have choices literally of dozens of countries all over the world. We hear a lot about China and India, and China and India are for real. But it's also Poland and Brazil and Estonia and all kinds of places, Belarus, that we were never thinking about 20, 30 years ago today. So that's a huge impact, because what it means is that there are more people seeking the jobs. And then the second issue is that thanks to the fact that we all carry around in our pockets these very powerful computers, the nature of people in getting work done has fundamentally changed. And we have plenty of employers in our state, as I'm sure you do in all of your states, that are producing twice as many things as they did 10 years ago, and they need half as many people. So what you have as a result, you've got more people. By the way, there are 3 billion people in the world looking for jobs, and there are only 1.2 billion jobs available. So when we talk about being in a global war for jobs, that's not an exaggeration. But what we are really in is a global war for talent, because the jobs are going to go where the talent is. And so we have relatively more workers because we've got people all over the world who have the skills to do this work, and we have relatively less demand for them because of technology. Huge implications for your students and for the people that we serve. And there was a book written a couple of years ago by a couple of professors from MIT. It's called The Second Machine Age. And in it, among other things, they write that there's probably never been a better time to be somebody with the right skills, but there's probably never been a worse time to be somebody without the right skills. And that has to inform like every waking moment for all of us. So that is the context in which all of us are doing our work these days. And so let me spend a few minutes talking about some of the work we've done in Delaware to address this issue. And so when you talk about pipelines, so much of the focus is often at the high school age and beyond. And in particular, we are really focused on the high-performing, low-income kids and getting them into college or getting them into a good job. But we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we've got more of those high-performing, low-income kids by the time we want them to be high-performing by the time they get to high school. Well, it doesn't just start in high school. And there's extraordinarily important work that we do starting at the younger ages. So in our state, as an example, we have made a massive investment in early childhood, in quality early childhood education. And I approached this issue. My dad was an accountant. My mother was a social worker. So I think I cover the gamut, no matter sort of what your perspective is about why you should care about this issue. The Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis, has done a number of reports that say the most effective economic development investment that a state can make is in early childhood education. Yeah, it's not what you normally expect to hear out of a Federal Reserve Bank. These are like, very numbers-oriented, return on investment-oriented economists. The most effective investment that a state can make in economic development is in early childhood education. So that's wearing my father's part of my brain. My mom was a social worker. And I'm sure many of you have met, and it's a tragedy every single time when you meet a 5-year-old who is already thousands of words or years behind their peers. And we know how hard it is to catch up. So we have invested significantly in early childhood education, but importantly, we've done so in a way that is not just about throwing money at the problem. It takes money, and we put a lot of money in, but the money has to be invested intelligently. Now, what does that mean? Now, we are fortunate in Delaware because we had a good foundation to build on. Many states around the country, including Delaware, have a rating system that evaluates the early childhood centers. Ours is called the STARS rating system. And these centers know what they have to do to earn a designation of 3 stars or 4 stars or 5 stars. And so what we did is we said to these centers, these are for low-income kids. In the past, each center would just get sort of a set amount of money for each low-income kid. And that amount of money, frankly, was not enough for any kind of quality. So we said, we got to think about this differently. And for this to be sustainable, we have to think about this issue from the perspective of the folks who are operating these early childhood centers. And so what we did is we said, if you achieve a designation of 3 stars, and by the way, the metrics are very clear. There's great transparency about what you have to do in terms of the educational background of the teachers in the classroom, the kind of curricular materials you make available, all those kinds of very clear metrics about what you have to do to get a STARS designation of 3 or 4 or 5. But we said to these centers, if you get a designation of 3 stars, you're going to be reimbursed for the low-income kids at 80% of the market rate. If you get 4 stars, 90%. 5 stars, 100%. So what this meant is that for the first time, the 5-star programs, these really good programs, had an economic incentive to accept the lowest income kids. Previously, they did not, because they would lose money. And similarly, for the mediocre programs, this was the first time that they had an incentive to invest in quality, because they knew if they went from 2 stars to 3 stars or 3 stars to 4 or 5, they were going to get a higher reimbursement. So they could invest in quality and get a financial return. And so the net effect of this has been incredible. We've gone, in 5 years ago, of the low-income kids in Delaware, 5 years ago, 5% of them were enrolled in the highest quality centers. Today, that number is 59%. 5 years, 5% to 59%. Thank you. And that is a game changer for those kids. And it's particularly a game changer because we're really focusing on connecting that early childhood experience with what happens in K-12. So as of about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, every incoming kindergarten student participates in what's called an early learner survey, so that their kindergarten teachers get to spend, and obviously they get paid for it, an intense, a key amount of time with each kid before they start kindergarten or at the very beginning of the year. So they know at the beginning of the year sort of what the kids' gifts are and what the kids' challenges are, and it creates an opportunity that they've never really had before to forge a strong relationship with the family so early in the year. And that's been really important. And we get to, we've got a great data system in Delaware, so we get to track these kids, these kids' performance throughout the system. Now, we've done a lot of other things within K-12, and I won't get into all the detail, but we've embraced the higher standards. We're actually willing to call them Common Core in Delaware. Not everybody is. Those that aren't, they're calling them something else, and my guess is they look a whole lot like Common Core. But the idea, when you look at about how American students have been faring on the international test for the last 20, 30 years, we don't do very well. And we just have to acknowledge that. We can pretend it's not so, but it is so. And so one of the most important things we can do is raise the standards, which we have. We've raised the bar in Delaware in terms of teacher preparation. We make sure that every single teacher in Delaware spends 45 or 90 minutes a week sitting at a table of their peers, just like these tables, with 5 of their peers, so 6 of them, spend 45 or 90 minutes a week drilling into the data about student achievement so they can figure out together what kinds of changes to make. And the teachers generally feel this is the best professional development they've ever done, because instead of somebody standing in front of a room talking at them, it's 6 of them working collaboratively talking about real students and real progress. We've done a significant number of things. One program I'm particularly proud of, which we think makes a lot of sense for these kids, we've opened up we're only in our 4th year, we've opened up 16 language immersion schools. So we have 2,300 kids from kindergarten through 3rd grade are spending half of their school day. They're learning science, social studies, and math in either Chinese or Spanish. By the 4th grade, they're proficient. And, it's another opportunity for these little kids, including in some of our, more challenged areas, and to see these little kids who are speaking Chinese. And we all know that the brain research says this is not a negative for them. The kids who can do this in both languages do just as well, if not better, in their English language courses as well. So lots going on at that level. But it all leads to what's going on in high school. And there are 2 main things I want to talk about, and it all has to do with pipeline. So I don't know if any of you know about the research of Caroline Hoxby, who is a professor at Stanford. She has done some extraordinary research on the issue of high-performing, low-income students. And the fact is, many high-performing, low-income students across the country, kids who by definition could succeed in college, never apply. Either because they think they can't afford to pay for it, or it's not within the realm of experience of their families to even think about it. We've got to fix that. I mean, this is what we call a total squandered opportunity for so many of these kids. So we are now in our 3rd year. We entered into a partnership with the College Board, the folks who administer the PSAT and the SAT. And we are fortunate in Delaware. We decided 5 years ago, when we won Race to the Top, that some of the money from Race to the Top, the money is now gone, but we're continuing the program, we would invest, and the taxpayers pay for every high school sophomore and junior to take the PSAT and the SAT during a school day. So the students don't have to come in on a weekend, and thank you. So the students don't have to come in on the weekend, and they don't have to pay for it themselves. So what this means is our participation rates are off the charts, and it allows us to identify a whole lot of very capable students who could be successful in college but who otherwise never even would have taken one of those tests. So we entered into this partnership with the College Board, and the College Board went out and they secured application fee waivers to up to 8 schools for these students. I mean, literally, for these students, the $75 or $100 application fee was reason enough that they wouldn't have applied. And, you know, these fee waivers have been around for a while, but they're complicated. So what the College Board has done for these students, they're automatic. And when they get notice of how they scored on their SAT, the package includes these application fee waivers to up to 8 schools. We have an intense, every single high school in Delaware has College Application Month. And what that means is every senior in the fall is during sort of, class time, fills out their Common App. During English class, they fill out their essay. And then we have volunteers who come in to work with the students and their families to fill out the financial aid forms. We stay in touch with these students by text or email or phone or however they choose. And we set a goal. We are only in our 3rd year, but we set a goal starting in our 1st year. We called it Getting to Zero. We wanted every college-ready senior in Delaware to apply to college. So we're in our 3rd year. In years 1 and 2, 100% applied, 100% were accepted, and virtually all of them enrolled. And previously, as many as 1 in 5 did not. We're a small state. So what this means is about 250 additional students each year going to college. Now, when we go into the high schools, we talk not just to the juniors and the seniors, we also talk to the freshmen. And there's a really important message for them. And this is based on research done by the College Board. The College Board, you can imagine they have data on everything. And they've looked at high school sophomores who test on the PSAT as being college ready. And then they look at those same students the next year as juniors to see if they're still college ready. And of the students who score college ready as sophomores, 11% are no longer college ready as juniors. And 35% of African American sophomores, 35% of African American students who tested college ready as sophomores are no longer college ready as juniors. Everybody understand the numbers? Well, the question is why? And the why is because these students are not taking sufficiently rigorous classes during their high school career. And so one of the most important things that we can do is to remind these kids, is to, educate these kids about the imperative of challenging themselves with the most rigorous classes possible during their high school career. That includes high school classes. It also includes, in Delaware, we have made a major increase from 800 about a year and a half ago to 2,700 this spring of kids who are taking college classes while still in high school. And that's separate from a program I'm going to talk about in a second. So we have more and more kids, high school students, taking college classes while in high school. A, it's more rigorous. B, it makes college less expensive to the extent they already have the college credits under their belt when they graduate from high school. And it's been really powerful, and the kids get really turned on by it. So that is that's focused very specifically at the population of kids who are interested in going to college. But then we have another program, and this really picks up where Chris spent most of his time. And it's what we call our Pathways to Prosperity program. We're only in our 3rd year. We have, and this program, and it's really built around these apprenticeships. These apprenticeships are of value to an incredibly broad array of students. We've taken a deep look at students who drop out of high school. Many of the students who drop out of high school are actually very intelligent, but they have come to the conclusion that what they're learning in high school is not relevant to what they want to do for the rest of their lives. That's an issue that we've got to address. That's number one. And number two, there are plenty of kids who do want to go on to college, but they have other interests besides the purely academic. So this Pathways to Prosperity program, which now exists, I think, in a dozen states, We've got this year 2,500, next year it'll be 5,000 students who participate in, this year 10, about 10 different career pathways. And you heard the introduction: manufacturing, bioscience, computer programming, culinary, allied health. And the way the program works is these high school juniors and seniors take, during their junior and senior years, 600 hours of classes at one of our institutions of higher education. They graduate with a high school diploma, with college credits under their belt, and with a credential, the kind of credential that Chris Liu was talking about, that they can take to an employer, and it proves to the employer they can do the job. And our employers, and this, again, if you're an employer, please, ears perk up at this. Our employers have stepped up, and they've guaranteed that 1,000 of these students will have summer jobs for the summer between their junior and senior years. And we want to keep driving that number up. But the difference that makes for a student, having that opportunity, not just to learn about it in the classroom, not just to do the hands-on with the manufacturing and the welding and everything else, but then to get into the workforce and, learn how to behave and to, interact with other, with adults, is invaluable. And so, and the point that Chris was making about Switzerland, absolutely, this country has not even been close. And I had the chance last year to go to Switzerland. The American ambassador to Switzerland is an incredible champion of this program. The reason this program exists in Illinois at Zurich, and is it Harper? What did you say? Harper College, is because the American ambassador to Switzerland is like so determined to bring this kind of expertise back home. And so we visited 2 manufacturing companies, and I got to meet these, these kids who were like 15, 16, 17, 18, and to see what they're doing. And they presented to me, of course, in English, in very good English, I will say, and the pride and the conviction and their knowledge of what they were doing and their excitement about where they're going in their career. And their high school graduation rate isn't all that high, but their employment rate is really high. But what's amazing about this, and when I came home, I called, at her suggestion, we have a lot of financial services jobs in Delaware, and I called the CEO of UBS North America, big Swiss financial services company. And he was telling me he started his life as an apprentice. And he could have had a very good career if he had stayed as an apprentice. It turns out he wanted to sort of go into like senior management, and he ended up going back to college. And so he is the best of both. But the only way this works is when the employers recognize how valuable this is. And so, once again, to the employers, this is not like some feel-good thing to do. This is how we're going to build our workforce of the future. Now, in Switzerland, they've really figured it out because, frankly, if you intern at if you're an apprentice at one manufacturing company, but you decide for your career to go to a different one, they're fine with that because they know that they're going to have other people coming in who have apprenticed someplace else. And it's just part of the DNA. And I'm not suggesting we are close to that, but what I am suggesting is we got to figure this out. And I think for the first time ever in this country, we are on a path because you're starting to hear more about this in state after state after state, as Chris was talking about. So that's pretty much what I had to say. But I do think that what you're doing, this building the pipeline, this bringing together the businesses and the educators, and focusing on these high-performing, low-income students, and encouraging them and pushing them, and providing the supports and providing them visibility into what kinds of opportunities are out there for them in the future, critical. There's no way we as a society can thrive, as a country can thrive, if we leave so many people who are smart and capable on the fringes. And for the educators who are in the room today, I'm sort of jealous of you because this is the work that you get to do every day. And I'm sure it's hard and I'm sure it's frustrating because I'm sure you feel alone. Because I think so much of the education system is not necessarily geared like it should be to the students that you're teaching. But just know, I think the rest of the world, I think the political system, and I think the rest of the world is catching up with you. So stay strong, and work with these, work with these employers who are showing up, and invite them into your school so that they can see how extraordinary these young people are. And together we're going to build something very special. Thank you all very much.